Right. Hi, everyone. Adam Asnes here with another monthly webinar from Lingoport. We've got some a really interesting program ahead of you. Um, I'm kind of excited to do this in August. We typically skip August, but we wanted to keep the rhythm going and go monthly. Uh, there's a lot of people that attend our webinars every month. And so some of what I'm about to say right now is really pretty, you've heard it before. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that we really spend time on Q&A afterwards, and we have some really cool new concepts to show during this webinar. So we'll be around for questions. Now we stop the broadcast no matter how many questions, usually at about an hour. But I do like to stay on and answer. If there's a lot of them, I'll answer them. But we'll try to wrap it up within an hour for sure. Um, the other thing is, if you would please use the Q&A button in Zoom versus the chat for any questions. That minimizes the amount of me having to look in multiple places for questions. Now, some people may be on LinkedIn Live, and I can't have both LinkedIn Live and the Zoom interface up at the same time. So it's a little harder for me to see my questions on LinkedIn Live. Kate, who is on this call but hiding, there she is. Kate is over in Spain, but Kate, can you monitor LinkedIn Live for us?
Sure, yes, and we are live, all good. The broadcast is on, so
Okay,
yeah.
good. Yeah, last month there was some problem with LinkedIn Live. There was some hiccup. Always better, by the way, to join via Zoom. We just know that will work. So in this presentation, I've got a couple of guests here. First of all, I'll introduce Chuck Gorman a little bit more formally in a moment, but also want to mention that Olivier Liboban is standing by. You may have seen Olivier in previous webinars. He runs our product development. He's going to show some new concepts later on in the webinar. He gets an easy ride for the moment. Uh, Olivier is not feeling well today, so we'll keep his speaking to a minimum. But he's a pro. Anyway, so there we have it. We're going to get moving with the start of our webinar. I can see people are logging in. Again, use the Q&A interface for questions versus the chat, and that really helps me. All right, here we go. Come on. There we go. Let's introduce Chuck. He's our big guest for the week, for the month, rather. Chuck, besides being a super nice guy, he's had the director type roles at quite a number of companies. More recently at Reddit and Uber as a contractor consultant, but also leading roles at Philips, Guidewire, Bold, and the like. He's also been around a while. I hope you don't mind me aging you a little bit, but he's
No,
been
it's
doing
okay.
this.
Gray hair. So yeah.
He's been doing this since '89, so longer than me by like 10 years.
Wow. Okay, that makes me feel good. Thanks.
I have less hair.
That's
All
true.
right.
Okay. Thank you.
So there you go. Um, all right. So in any case, he's seen a lot and he's had to do things the hard way in the early days. And with lots of sophistication at other companies. I also want to note, Philips Healthcare, that means every word really means something. Not that other places don't mean something, but when the consequence of being wrong has to do with somebody's well-being, their health,
Yeah.
or not getting sued, that is one level that's a little bit beyond a UI mistake.
Right.
Although you don't want either one of those. All right, so we're going to get into it here. Obviously, there's a ton going on in the in the industry. One of the promises of this webinar is we call about something. There isn't really a name for it. I'm calling it always-on localization, and that kind of context. That's kind of the promise that AI can have. But there's some real issues with that, and if you're in the industry, you're probably pretty familiar with some ideas come to mind right away. So how would you handle that? So that's a lot of what we're going to work on during this webinar, the concept. So let's start early because there's this adopted flow, and we still see companies using this flow. It's not like everybody's switched off of this. This is still current. It works. Um, but the idea is, you create, and I'm specifically talking about software, not like a Word document or something like that. But you build a product, you extract the string, you build it with the strings extracted into files. You pipe that into a TMS. There's a queue, and it comes back. There can be some manual working in there sometimes, depending upon the sophistication. There's lots of Git connectors, but they have their hiccups also. But let's talk like what instead of me answering that, Chuck, what was that? What's that whole workflow designed to solve?
It was really and is really, I think, designed to solve for scarcity and constraints and limitations. You know, 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have as much computing power and as many free cycles. Sometimes we were even on those dreaded things called mainframes. There's also often, not so much lately, but more in the past a little bit, a lack of qualified linguists. I feel like a lot of linguists, when I first started in this industry, were basically college students looking for part-time jobs.
Hmm.
Um, Also, there was a problem, or we had to write our own tools to extract strings and figure out how things have changed and what strings have changed, what strings are new, and things like that. So those were kind of the three big issues. We needed a checkpoint where we could gather everything that had changed. We could do it weekly or something like that, or even daily, depending on how things changed. But we wouldn't want to send things out all, daily. Essentially, most of the translators and translation agencies or LSPs reviewed work per project, and bundling kept translation costs down. So it was a rational, well-engineered answer to the constraints of the era. So translation used to be the hard, expensive, and slow part. And that's what the old TMS batch model, or the current TMS batch model as well, was built to manage.
Right, right, right. So you have clear gates, like
Absolutely.
like a clear gate. We're not ready for translation yet. We're going to translate, right?
Right.
Um, One of the issues that we see come up with customers, an issue we solve is deltas. So in other words, there's only, like we've done a little revision, there's only 10 new words. Do we have
Mhm.
to send out everything, or we just send these 10 words, for instance?
Right.
Or conversely, we're adding a locale. Like how do I do that? I'm just adding a locale. And there's a lot of automation that we provide now. But I want to address like it's still kind of a linear process. It's the promise that we're being sold with LLMs is that it's sort of like this is my idea. It was a customer's way of putting it. It's like when you walk into a room and there's an automated light sensor,
Yep.
and it just goes on. Now it's not too big a deal, and you may not even want that to flick a light on, but that is one aspect. And so that's a different way of thinking, but that brings on a whole new bunch of constraints that you can imagine. Um, uh, uh, you know, instead of me putting like what might be a problem with that, Chuck?
Well, as you said, maybe you don't want the light to come on. Maybe it's too bright. Maybe you don't need it because it's the daytime. There's a
Uh,
lot of issues kind of along those lines. And, once again, you don't want to automatically trigger a translation or a localization or whatever kind of flow just based on somebody checking something in.
mhm.
Maybe they should tag that saying, okay, this is final, or I consider this to be final, as opposed to just every time some engineer checks in some code because they don't want to lose it or whatever, then you don't want to automatically go on that. So that's definitely one of the similar type of analogies, I would say.
We'll get into a lot of other conditions that, around, um, quality checks. We'll get into context. There's a lot going on here, but I want to take us back a little bit to 1999 and the Agile Manifesto. So long time, that's like a long time ago now. And we take a lot of that for granted. But there's some elements of the Agile Manifesto that still, and it's funny, I had a very short period where I worked with some of the authors of the Agile Manifesto. So I had to read up on it and everything. But um, the some of the critical things in Agile is you have to be able to show your work so that you can revise it with
Yep.
input, right?
Right.
And one of the problems that I've always seen with translating later is that there isn't a feedback loop until
Right.
the developers have moved on.
Right.
Effectively, the developers are always moving on to the next thing. So if you're waiting till everything is done and then maybe you have a week delay or 3 days delay, and really we were all really proud of 3 day delays. I mean that's
Oh yeah.
that's really good, right? But the
Yep.
developers may have moved on. If we find things in test, the developers have moved on. They're in a different part of the code. So the problem with that is the developer has to go back and re-enter this other part of the code and flip their brains and their environments and everything to that different part of the code to fix anything, which is why I would joke over the years, localization issues, mistranslations, bugs, they go to Jira to die. I mean,
Yep.
this is the reason,
Yep, very true.
right.
So often those engineers will be working on something completely different, and
Right.
they not only to shift their mindset back to something they worked on, maybe even a couple years ago, that we find the bug now. That they're also constrained by other or their current tasks.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not just a matter of saying, hey, this needs to be fixed and needs to go into Jira, but somebody else needs to come along to their current manager or their project manager or whatever and say, hey,
Mhm.
can we borrow Steve for 2 weeks to fix these bugs? So that was always definitely a very big issue. Uh,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, just establishing some background for everybody.
sure.
The other thing is, you have this review, and the review can be, there's different reviews. There's the review that a linguist might provide, and that
Yep.
might be behind the curtain with your LSP, your service provider, your
Right.
localization vendor. There's also, probably everybody who's in the industry has had to deal with, particular complaints. Let's say I'll pick on one locale, Japan. There's a lot of intricacies to how that language, there's multiple scripts, how that language is implemented, right? So over the years, I've seen the most pushback from, let's say, distributors or stakeholders from Japan. That review can be much later. So let's flip this back to these three questions here, and I'm already getting behind in my schedule, so I probably move things along here. But
Talk
where
faster.
have you seen localization automation really work? You've been in a bunch of places.
Yeah, I really see it work, to tell you the truth, in um, what we'll call now the agentic side. Being
Mhm.
able to not have to sit down and do a build, just push a button and have a build.
Mhm.
Um, some of the other areas, or some of the more problematic areas, I think, or actually you're really looking for where it's worked. To me, that's the main area. But now we're moving into stages or phases of our product and our product design where we can use LLMs to figure out, okay, does this make sense at least? So at least for a first pass kind of thing, something like
Mhm.
that. To me, those are probably the big areas. Um, there's certainly others, but those
Mhm.
are the main things that come to mind at this point.
Okay, I'll come back to the next thing I'm going to talk about a little bit
Sure.
in more detail, but I don't know of I mean, I don't know everybody, but every developer I talked is getting assistance from Claude or whatever the LLM.
Yep.
A lot of companies have like you shall only use this LLM,
Right.
proprietary to them, for obvious intellectual property reasons. But you really can have the LLM do the translation for you. Um,
Absolutely.
so what's the liability there?
Well, to me, the main liabilities that I worry about with just sending translations to the LLM is that um, it needs some kind of translation memory or a glossary. It needs to know what you've done in the past. It needs to know, what terminology you use, what words, the sentence structure, and things of that nature. Um, so really, if somebody's going to be using Claude or developers going to be using Claude to translate things, um, maybe that's okay. But if we can train those developers or train the LLM to check the translation memory, check the glossary, and translate based on that. That, to me, the main way to make it useful and to make it correct.
Okay.
Because if you have 40 or 50 engineers or even 10 engineers each generating their own translations and not speaking the language, then it's going to look like 20 or 30 different people translated it or wrote it. And sometimes that's acceptable, but in most of these large enterprise applications, you need something a little more consistent.
I'm going to mention a few words. Governance.
Yep.
I mean, especially like most of our customers at Lingoport are actually pretty large companies. So governance is a real big deal. How this gets used, how this gets applied. You mentioned it's going to look like multiple people translated this product.
Yep.
You need a review mechanism. You really do need
Absolutely.
some kind of centralization that happens. Um, when we talk about terminology, we also need to include concepts like context. Like what is the context of this? And the like. And there's various ways to do that. I mean, you can solve that problem in a number of ways. But that review mechanism, that centralization is where this breaks down. If you have a team in India and you have a team in Poland and you have a team in the Bay Area, they're all doing different things. And even especially if you have a large product, that's broken down into pieces and
Yep.
different teams working on different pieces. So um, all right. So there's also been, and I feel like this has not been strongly addressed in the industry. There's been a huge movement, and this predates, the whole rollout of LLMs, to design focused development. So it used to be that, a developer would, create the interface, and that sometimes had some ugly results, but you also get, sort of developer English. Various developers may not have English as first language. Even
Absolutely.
if they do, like misspellings happen, wrong phrases, all that kind of stuff. But we have this movement to design, and I take this with a grain of salt, but I asked an LLM, like, what's the market share for Figma? So Figma is used, anybody new to this, to design a UI. Very powerful modal tool that you can have like fake buttons and all that kind of stuff. You then hand that design to developers and you say, make this real, right?
Yep.
But if you're designing in Figma, that's like a huge opportunity for localization,
Absolutely.
right? Because now, I mean, the industry always talks about shifting left, and by that, shifting earlier in the cycle, so you kind of get ahead and you're not always dragging behind.
Yep.
Now, like right from Figma, you can buy like a translation module. There's lots of Figma plugins to translate. But we looked at that and said, well, in addition to translation, there's a lot of opportunity. First of all, in the Figma modeling side, we can say things like, for every language that we're going to support, what's the longest string that a designer will ever have to accommodate?
Right.
You know, and let the designer see that, right?
Hmm.
Um, so that's a super cool feature that we add. Of course, the designer maybe wants to toggle through and see what does this look like in other languages.
Absolutely. Right.
That can be, you need to design around fonts, you need to design around space and all that. So we're predicting that. But then the handoff to the developer, they have to recreate all that. And we saw that as an opportunity. So I'm going to talk about something. It's a concept unique to Lingoport. We call it Figma to Dev. We're not, if we were cooler, we'd have some snazzy name, but Figma to Dev is uh, people get it really. The idea is all of that Figma capability, but we grab it, so we grab it together with a visual context text mapped to every string. We grab it and then we can send it out either to a TMS or an LLM, whichever people want, right?
Yep.
But then we take it one step further. We actually create the files and all the artifacts that the developers need, and we stick them in whatever Git repository or whatever they're using, so GitLab, GitHub,
Yep.
whatever it is, we, kind of support everything out there. Um, and we stick it in there, and the developers have it. We're actually getting ahead of localization,
Absolutely. It's like
right?
pre-translation. We used to
It-
use pseudo translation for all the things you just described. Now we can use relatively real translations.
right,
How beautiful is
right,
that?
right. And there's time.
Yep.
There just as a natural delay. Now you might say like, there's always some change that happens in development. Like something comes up and it's like, well, that's not going to work. And so
Right.
developers have to work, or an error message or something like that.
Hmm.
Well, we pick up that the way we always did. Whenever you make a change, developer localizer grabs that naturally. It looks at the files. It makes sure that there isn't an error. Like let's say, there isn't a missing curly bracket or
Yep.
any number of things. Pluralization is properly handled. There's a whole bunch, and there's correct terminology for that. But anyway, so that's stuff that Localizer has always handled. But this moving left in Figma to Dev is really kind of like our customers are all over this because it's super cool. Um, it does require them to change how they do things, and that kind of change always, it's a little bit of a movement, but it's really well received. Hey, you want to do some work for me? Great. You know,
Right. Yep.
super. So, all right. So, I mentioned number one, like strings that never appear in design, we pick them up automatically, right? So, um, where the handoff usually breaks, I'm going a little fast, Chuck, so forgive me here
No
because I
problem.
want to get to the other stuff we have to do. Um, it's just like you could say, well, we'll stick the whatever we did in Figma in translation memory, but that's just not the same. Like the file is already there. The
Right.
developer doesn't even have to write a string in whatever the source locale is. I mean, it's just done, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and this where should review not happen? I would say like in between, when you're kind of
During
iterating.
development, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't want to be changing things when you expect it still to be changing. It's
right,
good to get an initial kind of evaluation of it in the
right,
language. And once again, maybe the LLM is really good for that.
right,
Um,
right.
on the other side of that is some strings are going to be more important than others in terms of legality and
Hmm.
difficulty and things
Hmm.
like that. So it's helpful to be able to sort those out ahead of time. Okay, this is a tooltip, for example,
Right,
and it doesn't need to be, or it's not super critical that it's very explanatory and things. It just needs to be able to be translated and have people understand what it
right.
means. So if you can do that and you can keep things going in the right direction, I think you're golden, really.
Great. So I'm also gonna show some concepts with like it. It's not a done. Olivia is going to make sure I know we don't have this done yet, but we're going to show some stuff that's super cool that we're doing with Localizer. And I expect to have later this year. Olivier won't let me share a date because there's always some security update that fouls up
Yep.
your best laid plans. But all right, so if the concept with always on is that many strings won't wait for a human, but what do we need to still control? We've touched on a lot of this, but
We need to control ownership and responsibility. It's nice that you can do this in an automated manner and things like that. But in the end, you really need to know, okay, so and so made sure that it was run with our tools. And then they also need to show or be able to represent somehow that if it's an important string that needs human review, that it has been human reviewed and
right,
that you can trust that and keep going. Left shift is great, but it shifts many of the things that are desirable left, but maybe some of the things that it really needs, like the review and the guarantee that somebody has looked at this, it doesn't really shift along with it. So we're still kind of doing a lot of end review. Hopefully you can do it during the middle of development and not have those items change, but you never really know. Need to be able to do everything.
I'm also going to say like some of the basic functionality that's been in Localizer like since its inception is there's like 40 odd checks that we do on files when they go
Right.
first up to the translator and back. I can't believe how often something gets broken in
Oh yeah.
in the process. And this isn't like you chose the wrong word. This is like you made some little nit, some little tick in the file by accident, right?
Yep.
It happens all the time. And I mentioned pluralization because when you get into that, um, that gets wrong a lot. And
Yes.
how that file TMSs on the whole don't handle that well is what we've seen. There are certain ones that are better than others, but there's
I
there's
agree with
often
that.
like workarounds that we have to implement in there. Um, Gender. But even little things like I mentioned, a missing curly bracket, these are human errors that just happen, right?
Yep.
And they happen from both sides, both from the developer, but also the translator sending things back in an erroneous format. And um, one of the dangers with automation is that if you don't catch those things, you're now speeding up the rate at which you create localization bugs.
Right.
So you really have to, like within automation, you have to have checks. And developers are really used to this concept. They have all kinds of checks for their coding constructs and you know the way that they write things. So it follows suit that localization needs to have the same. And I've seen that that's one of the key things that Git connectors get wrong, honestly. They're just kind of dumb. They you know, I don't mean to like dumb in a way that they just do this one thing. They just
Yep.
move files,
Right.
right? All right. So I mentioned we're going to show some new stuff. I'm going to stop sharing, bring in Olivier here. There he is, out of the ether. Um, and he's going to show some new concepts. Boy, stop share. You'd think I know how to use Zoom by now. All right. Go ahead, Olivier. You have the uh, control.
Only live 7 minutes, so the timer is on.
Okay.
This
Good.
is a concept that we're doing for String Manager, which is a part of Localizer. Localizer automates the translation going from Git repositories to TMSs or other translation capability, either LSPs or TMS or LLMs or machine translation engines. On this end, this is what comes from typically repository. So this is coming from developers. Developers are going to write strings. And then on that end, this is what is coming back from translation. Translation is going to be done mostly by TMSs with reviews and maybe with context and with prompt and with all kind of different things to help the TMSs do things. But we've noticed that our customers also want the ability to check things. So one of the things that Adam mentioned is we have directed checks, meaning that's not LLM, that's really exactly how things should happen so that the JSON file is well formed, it's well encoded, the parameters are done the right way. This has to be precise. It cannot be left to an LLM. It has to be right because the consumption by the application needs to have that key referring to that variable that is replaced in the code. So it needs to be right. There is a second level that we're doing now, which is scoring the language this time. So this is a little more fuzzy. This is LLM based. We typically will have at least one LLM that will do the validation of the strings that are created by developers. And because developers may be in different time zones, some of them may speak French mostly, and others some other language, and they're all trying to write it in English. We're going to have something that will be prompted and that will have the ability to say, what is the score for this written string by a developer? If it's 5, probably it's okay. But you may want to still go through and decide to select certain strings based on the fact they have been reviewed or not. So there are some things that you want to pay attention to. Those are those kind of things that are in a different color. And so if you say, well, show me things that are medium or that need review, or different filters will bring different parts of what needs to be focused on. Maybe I need to focus on mechanic droid. If I expand this, it will let me know that mechanic, it reads as a noun. Mechanical is likely intended as a droid type, as an example of a grammar. This is an example. This is not a real thing. It's just a concept, right? It also says for the translation for this guy is that it should be mécanicien, should be mécanique as opposed to mécanicien. So again, an adjective as opposed to noun pretty much. So we have things that are going to be checked from an LLM in terms of how well the source code was written, and then another LLM or maybe the same LLM to check how the translation was done. The translation may have been done by a different LLM, by the way. And the fact is that we can also have context. So if you have this picture that is being pushed over for this sentence or those terms to be translated into French, then you may have enough information to get to it. As you're reviewing the French here, you may actually add something that says, you know what, it should be translated that it should be this meaning here, whatever that you want, so that when you retranslate, It will not just be for French that it's retranslating, it's for all the locales that you've decided upon, which may be any of those locales in that instance, so that you will add some more information for things that have had a bad translation from an LLM perspective or from your perspective. Maybe this guy you want here, this was not reviewed yet. Let's have a look at it. You don't like this, enter a prompt, retranslate. Retranslate either in one locale or in many locales. So the point here is that we're not replacing TMSs. What we're checking is before things are finalized and moved to the repo, we're making sure that the source is done the right way. And again, you can decide that, yeah, this is fine, even though it has a 3 from the LLM, you're okay with it, based on the fact that you have a context that comes from Figma or a running application or a screenshot of something. And also, if that's fine, then you don't need to care about the 3 here. The LLM decided it was 3, that's fine. Something that's 5, you may actually say, wait, I want to double check this. And so you'll have a different way to note this. And then to filter things based on what you want to check your review on. So you'll focus on really those items that are of most import from the perspective of an LLM scoring perspective. So for us, this can be used pretty much directly with an LLM, and then you're always on. Like you return this right away, and it's back to Figma, for example, and then you have all the time in the world to check in French everything that has been done. Move that back in Figma, you'll see that. Or you have a little bit more, human in the loop from the transition perspective. It goes to a TMS, maybe it comes from a repo, maybe it comes from S3, it comes from a different data source, and everything is here so that you have scoring. You can resend for translation. You can prompt for more things. You can have the context that's associated with it. And that makes for higher quality with a faster turnaround, with a lot of control over the correctness of the files that are being pushed to the repository from an application perspective, and some control over and quality scoring over the way the strings were translated, which are 2 different things. I'm at 6:14. I'm done with the demo. Adam?
Good job. All right. Good. All right. I'm gonna just mention a couple of other things that you kind of had to go over quickly because I didn't give you a lot of time here. There's already quite a bit of prompting capability in Localizer. This includes, visual prompting, which is, like a picture of what you're doing with a string association to where that string is in the picture. There's project level prompting, so you can say things like, hey, this is an application that will help people choose what color paint they want, and use, you can say, here's a URL with documentation, use this to guide how the LLM translate. And then finally, even a system level prompt, which is, something like, I'm making this up. The LLM is acting as a translator. Do not include the reason for the translation. That's like, just so you get to the crux of what you're doing. So there's just a lot there that you can do so that out of the chute, if you are choosing an LLM-based translation, you can get a good answer initially. And really, our tests show really quite good. The visual aspect really works, and we found it not to be incredibly like token expensive to do that. So that's just, cool little bit in our own testing. We gave a webinar on that like last fall, what we'd been finding there, and it was really quite good. So I see we have one question coming in, but we're going to address those in a little bit. All right. So one of the things that we've seen over the years, but especially now, is that companies are going to more locales very quickly. So like a customer might start with us with say 8 locales, and within a year, suddenly they're in 40 locales. That's the kind of thing that we're seeing a lot. But there's possibly some complication with that. So Chuck, we talked about this a little bit. What might be a liability with going to so many languages quickly via LLM?
I'd definitely be concerned with review and control. Um, you know, in healthcare and things like that, is just like kind of alludes to here without losing control. A lot more of the strings, a lot more of the concepts are not only regulated, but health related. If you say remove somebody's spleen and it says remove somebody's heart or something like that, it's obviously a huge issue. Um, I think that the jump from, 8 or 10 languages to 30 or 40 or something like that is natural. And upfront, it sounds like it should be easy. It is certainly easier and less expensive than doing your first couple languages. Um, but you're really still creating yourself a huge bucket of work. You need to make sure that things make sense to the users and that everything's functional and appropriate in terms of the translations and other things like that. Um, there's certainly some other issues with tests, but once again, agentic AI, you can automate a lot of that, and hopefully your automation will be appropriate. Um, Sometimes it's not, and sometimes when you're jumping from 10 languages to 40 languages, you really need to be aware of those things, especially things in terms of like formality of the strings and things of that nature. um, so yeah, those are the main things that come to mind, and probably some of the bigger things. There are certainly others that are specific to the application and the industry and the languages involved. Um, but if you think about it a while and you look at things a while and you get somebody in who's had a lot of experience in this area, you can keep them under control and you can move forward relatively quickly.
What about LLM proficiency in some languages?
Um, I've dealt with that a fair amount lately. Moving into some of the Eastern European languages and the Asian languages that aren't used so much, there's a lot less context. I guess I'll call it, for the LLMs to be able to translate. Um, so you really need to be careful with those. If I'm moving into a new language that doesn't have a lot of data, translation data for it, I want to do some extra human review or some extra LLM review through a different system, something like that. So, yeah, the availability of translations and the quality of the translations, or whatever they're going to call it on the LLM side, is extremely important. Um, like I said, if I'm moving into a new market, a new locale, I'm going to want to make sure everything's looking really good, because there's going to be things that you miss, or there's going to be
Mhm,
things that aren't quite right, or look great to these three
mhm.
linguists, but you get some other linguists in, and they're going to very much disagree. So those are definitely some areas.
Right, right. We're using all these, medical examples of getting it wrong, but I'm just going to add, like, if you're at, say, I know you worked at Uber, and probably almost everybody on this call has used the Uber app on the
Yep.
phone. If it has something wrong, that gets multiplied by a lot of people,
It
you
really
know.
does. Yeah. I mean, if it's an application that is used by millions of people and you have
Right,
one or two words wrong, you're going to get 1,000 complaints. Well, hopefully
right,
you get 1,000 complaints so you know what to fix. Uh,
right,
but
right,
yeah, that
right.
is definitely an issue.
And maybe the worst thing is when something's wrong and you don't get a complaint, you
Right.
know. It
Right.
stays wrong for years, you know.
Yes. I've been in situations where we've found bugs that have been sitting there for several years, sometimes even as many as 8 or 10 years, and
Right,
nobody's
right.
complained about it. Either they've worked around it, or maybe it's an area that doesn't really get used as much as we think. So that's where the more data-driven type of evaluations really become more important. If everybody uses something, you need to be sure it's good. If there's some tooltip 8 screens down, then, maybe it's okay that it's not perfect
Mhm.
as long as they
Mhm.
can understand it.
Right. Good way of putting it. Okay. All right, we're getting close to the end there. So, everybody, please fire up your questions. I saw a comment from Luz, who's probably going to be our guest in the next month's webinar, by the way. But
That's
all
your
right,
notice, right?
yeah. She's great. All right, look, 2 or 3 years out. This is the Swami question. Okay. Look 2 or 3 years out at software companies shipping in 20 languages. What's their default? Is no delay localization with review what they're building towards, or one option among several?
I think it's one among several. There are a lot of different things that can happen, a lot of different things they should be looking at. Um, there's a lot of things that can change. 2, 3 years is a long time in today's computing environment.
Right,
So
right.
what we see in 2 or 3 years may be completely different than what we're seeing and what we're thinking about now. Um, I'd say the default for anything that isn't really legacy constrained, um, the same way continuous integration became the default over batch releases. Not everybody agreed philosophically, but because the alternative got too slow, this really becomes a one option among many, I think. That stays true longer than people expect for teams with real constraints and in heavily regulated industries and certification bound markets. Infrastructure can't really support the real-time decision. So I would definitely venture to guess that it's going to be not universal and one option among several.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. All right, it's time to ask questions, and I really hope we get some. This isn't a large audience. We're always worried about having a webinar in August because, especially now, I mean, for a lot of people, this is the last chance. Their kids are going to start school soon, and this is the last chance to get away. Schools have started here in Colorado, so that chance happened. I want to mention one message from Luz because that came in first. She writes, it would be great if somehow Lingoport could update the translation memory in the TMS when strings are being fixed in the string manager. It would be a game changer. Difficult to implement due to the number of TMSs we connect to. She knows how many we do. But just putting it out there, very useful for quick fixes. I agree. However, I really think the subject of translation memory and what that means is in for a lot of change. It may not be the leverage that it has been, in the past, and that's probably me ruminating, and I could be really wrong, but you can point to a translation memory file in one way if you're going to an AI centric model, and I really do believe that's what's in our future. Not necessarily the TMS being the arbiter of all translation. Uh, uh, I can tell you that you could do that now. However, our customers aren't there yet. Is what there's a lot of piloting going on for little things. Um, but production is another thing. And I think for all the webinars, like every webinar is about AI these days, for all of that, in a practical sense, we're not quite there yet for the bulk of customers that I talk to, especially at scale. All right. We've got a question here. Thank you. What would you recommend within this setup concerning accessibility and user experience over multiple languages? User comprehension can be an issue in continuous localization without user testing. Can agents support this in a way? Olivier, if you're still on, I'm going to ask you to take this one and then I'll fill in. And then Chuck, if you have any ideas too.
I mean, you can set up prompts for accessibility. That's not really what you want though, because what we're looking at is just code is source files. So we look at source files, but when you have accessibility, it's really something that's running, so something that's deployed with a certain color contrast and font and other things. So it's we're looking at a different view of the world. We're looking at translation of strings that are in text files in effect. Uh, the the context that we add, meaning the screenshots or from Figma, that can add a little bit to accessibility, but it's I would say it would be a secondary citizen. Chuck?
I think you pretty much said what I was going to say there. Yeah. Um, Once again, maybe if we think about it a while, we can figure out a way that we can bring in more from more different sources to kind of tie it together and to kind of allow more understanding and better accessibility for other customers, other people in other situations. But yeah, that's basically where it is.
Okay. There's also, this question asked, kind of talks about ambiguity a little bit, user comprehension of whatever is translated, and that's difficult to do over multiple languages. I want to add that one of those things that Olivier showed was using a secondary LLM to review the translation and kind of signal where a human review may need to be involved. Now, you can sort of tune the granularity of that review criterion. One level of granularity may be different, tolerance wise for different types of applications is kind of what I'm thinking. Um, but the idea of being able to see that before it goes back into the code or at a later point to just say, hey, we think this is ambiguous. We want to retranslate this. That's one of the things that we're facilitating. So, you can be always on in that delivering that localization right away, but you also have the opportunity to go back and say, hey, I don't like what I did here. Um, I'm going to retranslate this term based on that. So it's not like the typical linear flow of like it goes from file to translator and back and you're done, or back and reviewed and then done. It's goes one way, it's back, it can be reviewed and then back, it can be reviewed and then back. So we're trying to take out that, once and it's done kind of mindset so that you can update. That's one of the things that we're providing here is that hook into Git so that we say, hey, we're wrong about this. We want to change this translation. And we can do that without a major headache. Chasing down the string and getting into a piece of the code that maybe the localization agent doesn't have access to. There's that whole level of making that easier. So, think of it, translate, hey, we're going to translate on Monday, but then we're going to look at this and then make fixes on Wednesday, you know. And for a lot of applications, that's, like you have some, you know, gosh, there are some places doing daily releases. I mean, it's really rapid fire. That's obviously not everybody, but there's a lot of consumer-oriented products or apps that really have daily releases. So, you're facilitating that in a different way. So hopefully that
I,
answers that question. And
I've been involved in
yeah.
several situations like that. One thing that I found really important is making sure that the original English string is written in a way that's easily translatable. And then to be able to test it, just essentially treating the LLM that we're using to do the review just like another human.
Right, right.
Send things back out or however you're going to do it. In fact, it's a free human, so it's even better. And that can be very, very strong and very useful. The other side of that is if we're changing a term, I want to be sure we find that term everywhere and evaluate those and make sure that those don't need to be changed as well.
Okay, good, good. There was a further comment. Potentially there could be ambiguity test on the English source to limited issues further down the pipeline. Yeah, definitely. And the very first thing that Olivier showed was looking at the source to conceivably update the source because we would agree. I mean, you really want your source to be right, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. But I don't want to call whatever somebody did garbage, but precision in, precision out. We'll call it that.
Very good.
So I agree there. All right. Okay. And Luz adds, global English should be more than a concept, should be a standard. Okay,
Absolutely.
but go tell a team of developers spread around the world to do that, or a team of designers. I mean, I agree with you, but we don't live in a perfect world. Any other questions? I'm going to close it, and we're finishing on time. Look at that, Chuck. You've been an awesome guest.
Thank you.
You speak really well. You have a lot of experience to share, and all, and people should hire you.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, all right. And Olivier, thank you. I appreciate you logging in even while not feeling well and giving a little show and tell that you prepared. Thanks everybody for joining. You will automatically get a recording if you want to revisit this. There's nothing you need to do. For registrants that couldn't attend, I wish you had. We could have had more questions, but August is always a dicey time. There's always more people that register and listen to the recording. But if anyone has a question, it's not my official email address, but Adam@Lingoport works. You can always write me and I will take care of that for you. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your Thursday. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody.
Chuck.